Okay guys, it is 9 months later. I've been working on this project since May. I put it down for several months and it got busy with work and some other projects, and it's time to get this finished. Before we go any further, I want to give a shout out to my buddy J Dub. He donated this tabletop to this project. Basically this is a butcher block countertop that he had in his house, and they were pulling this out and putting some new stuff in, and so he knows that I like to make stuff, and so he gave me this. He's a real good guy, and he happens to be getting married next weekend. And I just wanted to say congratulations to him and his lady Coco, and wish them good luck and congratulate both of them. Okay, like I said, I started this project last summer. There's quite a bit of snow on the ground, which is a freaked out deal for South Carolina where I live. These are the finished parts. I pulled these out of storage in my shop, and so I'm gonna go ahead and put these together inside my sunroom and glue them up and everything in here. I think it'll probably glue up and dry out better inside. Plus, I don't want to be out there in this cold weather. Okay, this is some pallet wood that I've had in my shop for probably about a year. You can see it was left outside for quite a while. It's got some mold on it. So what I'm gonna do with this is I'm gonna make 4 table legs. I'm making a desk for my daughter. I bought these from a recycler. Gave me an entire truckload of these for $90. And like I said, he just let me pack my truck completely full of these. We palletized, I think, 80 something of them, and then he just allowed me to cram as many of them as I could into my pickup. And so some of them are pretty nasty. They're left outside for quite a while. You can see this one's got a lot of mold on it. I'm gonna try not to touch that, but basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna flatten them out. Before I do all that, I have a little metal detector I bought at Harbor Freight. And I gotta go through this really good to make sure there's no nails or anything. I learned pretty quick that they shot a bunch of staples and stuff like that. And even a little staple is enough to put a nick in one of these little joiner blades or planer blade. So these, I've separated them out. I got 16 of them. I'm gonna plane them down. I expect to lose like quite a bit of material. Like I said, some of them are flat and some of them aren't. And so we're gonna flatten them out, glue them together, and then I'm gonna square them up and make something close to a 4x4. I'll trim them up the end, maybe like 32 inches long. It's for my daughter, so I might make it a little shorter than like a standard table or desk. I just want to show what I'm starting off with because the end product is gonna look completely different. Really mainly trying to illustrate how much, you know, mold and garbage there is on this. And you know, people see this type of wood and they just throw it out. So, I mean, like I said, 90 bucks, I got a truckload. I've made a bed, a table, a whole bunch of stuff out of this. And if nothing else, if you're starting off as a woodworker, it's cheap material for you to experiment with. You can kind of, you know, try different things, mortise and tenon joints or whatever. And it's pretty benign. If you screw something up, you just throw it away. All right, I'm gonna demonstrate what I have here. This is pretty much a metal detector that I bought at Harbor Freight. You see that? So if I look closer, you see that little staple right there. So stuff like that, that's what you're looking for. Or nails or whatever. So anyway, I'm gonna pull that out and try not to break it off. And this one hand's kind of goofy, but a lot of times if you turn it. So I'm not sure if I got the whole thing. It looks like I got part of it here. Anyway, it's not perfect, but it'll give you a better idea than just eyeballing it or looking for holes and stuff like that. Like I was trying to illustrate earlier, this wood, it's not even close to being like flat. You can see this corner I have my thumb on right now, it's high. Over here on the other end is low. And so you pass it on the joiner to flatten out one side, and you can plane down the opposite side. So you set that first flat edge, and then you basically work off of that. Make sure that you get like a big push block. This is the one that I use. It's nice and tall, and it keeps my fingers way away from those blades. You can see I've hit it a couple times with my table saw, and even cut right down into it, but it'll keep your fingers out of the way. Sometimes if you have kickbacks and stuff like that, having a little distance between you and the machine is a good thing. Anyway, so you can see how crappy this looks. But I joined this side here. You can see there's some nice grain in here. But, you know, I mean, compared to the other side, this is what you get. And you can see that's nice and flat now. So what I'll do is I'll take it over there with that guy, that planer later on, and run it, and that'll flatten out the other side. Well, it'll make the other side parallel relative to this surface that I just created. And then it basically makes wood products that are square and that you can use to glue together and build stuff. All right, so I'm done milling all these down. You can see they're fairly square. They're all flat, and I've divided them into 4 different legs. And so what I did was I organized the grains. Usually what I do is I take the one with the most character and put that on the outside. Like when you buy furniture at the store, they try to limit the amount of character. People don't necessarily want, you know, shit like that visible. Anyways, for the way I'm finishing it, it really lends itself to having like long grain on the outside, like something like this where it's just like straight grain, no knots. And so I hid some of the pieces with more like knots in the inside. This one's pretty straight. It's got some of these veins in it, but it'll turn out looking pretty good at the end. Anyway, these aren't final dimension. After I glue them, there's gonna be a little bit of misfire in here where, you know, one will be proud. And so I have to like mill these down a little bit. And so I left like maybe a 1/2 inch of excess in both directions or so. I'm using these clamps. I got them at Harbor Freight. Some people like to buy like $100 clamps. I don't see any benefit to doing that, to be honest. You know, if I break this one, I could go buy 7 more before I amortize the expensive one. And so it's just, I mean, I've used these for years. They work fairly well. And so that's what I usually don't like endorsing Harbor Freight stuff. They make a lot of cheap tools. If you're gonna use it once, throw it away. It's a good solid company for that. But there are some things that make sense to buy. Their clamps are one of them. Also this metal detector, I think it was like $9. And if you save yourself a pair of $60 blades, it'll pay for itself in one time. So this is the kind of glue I use. About a gallon of this for some outdoor projects. This is weatherproof. They have a different kind of red bottle that's more like woodworking, but Titebond works pretty good. I'm sure there's other glues out there that work. I always have pretty good luck with this. It goes on, it's fairly viscous, dries quick. It's difficult to clean up, and after it dries, it holds really well. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lay this down. I'm gonna butter this side with some Titebond. I use, man, there's like 1,000 different ways to do this, and probably somebody has a better way, but I'm gonna just dollop some glue down on that face and use this trowel to like even it out. It's just a scraper. I use it for all kinds of stuff, but I'm just gonna put a really thin like skim layer down, not too much, on each one of these, and then I'll just flip it up. And then when I'm done, I'll clamp them all together. I'm gonna put clamps on the bottom. You don't wanna just clamp one side. The bearing area for these clamps is pretty small. So what I'm gonna do, I've got 2 more that I'm gonna set on top and tighten. All right, we're all glued up now. So you can see, make sure at this part, you wanna make sure that you get all this glue off of here. So I'm gonna, maybe I didn't explain this earlier, but I'm just gonna index all these against the edge of this clamp here, and then clamp them all together. I did not glue the joints in between here, obviously. So when I take it apart, the individual legs will come out, but you just clamp them all together. Have an even distribution of pressure on both sides of the leg. All right, we're all clamped up. I just wanted to show what I was talking about with the clamps. You put one on top, one on bottom. The stiffness of the boards, if you just put pressure in 2 locations per side, that you'll wind up closing all these gaps. So you can see everything's pretty tight here. Got a couple spots where, you know, you have a little bit of high, like that one right there. It's a little high. So anyway, I'm gonna wind up planing these again, but all right, I just got done squaring up these legs. They're exactly 4 inches by 4 inches. Basically what I did was after I glued them, on the glued edge, I ran it on the joiner perpendicular to one of these sides, and then I ran it to the planer. Like I said, I had some excess on both sides, so I just continued to run until both sides were parallel and the dimension was exactly 4 inches. There's nothing magic about these 4-inch legs. I've built a lot of these tables, and 4-inch seems to be like a dimension that looks pretty good, I think. I'm just trying to show you, I'm right at 4. Pretty square, not perfect, but it's pretty good. Let's check the other side. It's probably good, hopefully, yep. Okay, so all 4 of them are square just like this. So now what I'm gonna do is cut these to 26.5 inches. I get another 1.5 inches on that top that I'm gonna use there. Basically, I'm gonna sit this cut edge directly against the bottom of that tabletop surface. The reason I'm cutting them 26.5 is because I measured a couple other desks, and to the top surface was exactly 28 inches. And so it seems like a good height. So if I subtract $1.50 for that guy, 26.5 for these legs, and that'll put the top surface right at 28 inches. I'm gonna use a chop saw. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut, you can see right here, these aren't really even. On the end, I see this a little proud here. Some of them are under flush. So I'm gonna basically square this up against my saw, cut it at orthogonal to the saw, get a nice square edge on this side, and then I'm gonna measure from this 26.5 down, and then cut the other end. Actually, I think I might start on that end because I kind of like that, and I don't want to cut too much of it off. I like that little detail there. One thing about store-bought furniture, like I was saying earlier, like for example, that this butcher block, there's no blemishes at all, like no knots, no character, and so that's what they like. When they say select grade A or whatever, the high grade wood hardly has any character to it, and I think that's just mostly because in production it'd be viewed as a flaw. But honestly, I think like when you're making your own stuff, sometimes, you know, the natural character of the wood brings out interesting qualities and furniture and stuff like that. So a little feature like this, basically like I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a torch and then torch this. All these bond lines, see how the grain's like a little different? All this will disappear when I torch it, and then I'm gonna I have some polyurethane that has a chestnut stain, and that will just bring out sort of a blackened caramel. I made a bed for my daughter a few years ago, and I use the same method, and so I'm gonna try to make this match because it's going in the same room. And so I think this little edge here, it's full of resin. It should turn out pretty cool. These knots, they work out pretty good too. So really the only downside using pine to make stuff with is it's really soft. If you bump it, it'll leave a dent. But honestly, the strength to weight ratio is pretty good on pine. It's really strong and it doesn't weigh a lot in comparison with like an oak or whatever. If it's really inexpensive. And so obviously it's probably not the best looking wood out there, but you know, a lot of people throw it out. One thing I want to say, I gotta have this Dewalt chop saw. It's pretty easy to use. Just make sure everything gets zeroed up. It's pretty square. One of the things I like about it is it's got this light that uses the shadow of the blade to show you where it cuts. You can kind of see right there how that works. I have had other saws with a laser before, and the problem I've had with those is that when you start cutting, the dust from the saw gets in the laser. Cut something. All right, I cut these ends. One thing I noticed with the saw is if you orient the boards like this, where the saw's coming in from on this side, instead of if the boards are vertical, you get less breakout. You can see how smooth that one is. I cut this one with the boards vertical, and for some reason I got more breakout. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna measure this guy out. I said 26.5 inches. It's not as important to get dead nuts on at 26.5 inches as it is to get them all exactly the same. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna measure the first one, and then I'm gonna set a backstop on the saw. That's that little dude right there. And that way I can just bring the next one in and square it up with the fence, and then click the end on there, and then that way I'll get the exact same cut on all 4 of them. Like I said, if they're all like different lengths, you'll wind up with the table rocking, and you don't want that. So okay, so this is what I was talking about. So I basically drew this line in here. I got this set exactly at 26.5 inches. I'm gonna show you, so I have this light, and it shows you where the kerf of the saw is relative to the line, and that lets you cut right up next to that line. You would never be able to do that with a laser. I don't know if you can see it from this angle, but that kerf, it shows you can get it right up next to that line. Okay, so the first couple of these I did by hand. It's really time consuming, and these are so deep that it can get kind of sloppy. So what I did was I just used my router table to cut, just to start this tenon groove or the mortise, and I got it as deep as I could using the router. It's a nice straight edge in there now. And then what I'm going to do is I have this mortising tool that I hook up to my drill. It actually lets you drill a square hole. It's got this square chisel on it, and it's got a drill bit with the auger that goes down the middle. It lets you drill a deep hole. The reason why I did it like this is because I wanted to start and get that nice smooth edge, and then I'll just follow that edge with this chisel. Should clean up pretty nice. So this is going to take about 1/10 of the time as doing it by hand, if less than that. But I just want to do the first couple just to do it. I'm trying to get through it at this point, so I got all the tools, so I'm gonna go ahead and get this knocked out. But if you can do these by hand, I guess that's the point. There's about 5 other ways to do it as well, using either a router or something like this. Alright, basically what I did here was I marked this, and I'm kind of scalloping it in a little bit with the bandsaw. So I'm rough cutting it on 2 sides. This is the outside edge, and then I'm going to basically fair that in using a sander and some scrapers, and so I'll get it all cleaned up. But what it does is it makes the lines a little bit nicer. One of the things when you're using reclaimed lumber, it starts to look like you're building stuff out of pallets pretty easy. And so after you get everything the way you want it, if you kind of round the lines a little bit, I've noticed that it makes it look a little bit better than just a bunch of blocks glued together. So what I did, I measured this. Basically, I cut the middle of where I want the arch to be, and then I put a 3/4 inch offset here, 1.5 inch or 1/2 inch offset here and here. And then I'm drawing straight lines, but when you fair it in by hand, it'll be fairly round. And so when I'm cutting, I'm staying on the right side of that line. I just happen to have a big bandsaw that I'm using. Man, I want to say you could do this by hand, but it would take forever. So you don't necessarily need a big bandsaw, but first I'm going to cut this side, and then I'll block this side out, and then I'll flip it 3 times and cut it here. I got this side marked here too. And so that'll put an arch here, and then there'll be an arch on this side going that way. All right, I got all these legs cut. So basically what I'm gonna do is use a card scraper. This guy right here. So I don't know, you guys can, if you don't know how to use one of these, check it out. I got that at Amazon, a pack of them. I think it was like 20 bucks. It works fairly well at smoothing stuff out. And so what I'll do is I'll try to take down some of these high spots and contour this in by hand. I mean, the cut was really gradual. It goes from 0 to 1/2 inch down to 3/4 of an inch and back up. I'm sure there's a way I could have did a better job cutting it, but I've done this before. I'm sanding with 120 grit right now. And then that should, for the most part, take it all down. And then I'll use 220 or 240, whatever it is, to smooth it out at the end. And so I'll try to get them all as uniform as possible. It's not perfect, but it should look pretty good. By the time I get done with this, like I said, I'm going to use a torch on it. Final dimensions aren't really super critical. Okay, these are starting to shape up. You can tell they're really smooth, and I have sawdust all over the place. You don't want to really make it look like a machine made it. I think that's one of the cool things about making your own stuff. It's not gonna be perfect. They're not all 4 gonna be the same, but as long as it looks like you put some time and effort into it, I think that's the main thing. I think this side's a little wavy still. I'm gonna knock it down some more, but you kind of get what I'm doing here.